Rightio. Okie dokie. And we're live. Welcome to this episode, I think episode 11 of Collapse Broadcast. So, today's Collapse Broadcast, before the pattern begins, that is the point I want to take this discussion, this conversation today. Before the behavior appears, before the body response gets interpreted, before you have an explanation for what you just did. That's the point that I want to focus on. That point, that exact point, is where I will focus, because this is where Codex begins. And that is where real change becomes possible. My name is Judy V, and I'm founder of the Codex system, a structural operating model for human behavior and function. Human behavior is not primarily psychological. And that is why so many intelligent, self-aware people spend years looping inside the self-development world. They understand themselves more and more. Their language gets clearer and cleaner. Their explanations get better. But under pressure, the same output, the same behavior, the same responses appears again and again and again. Because behavior is generated by how signal is routed through the body. And when that signal distorts before behavior appears, the pattern has already begun. And this is where the pattern takes position before you even explain it, before you can see it, before you can name it. So today I want to take you to the point before the pattern, the point before the story, the point before the explanation, before the point that most models or all models do not ever reach. Because you can spend years looking at a pattern, understand the reaction, explain the shutdown, name the wound, regulate the body, describe the behavior in the most beautiful detail. Then life applies pressure, and the same thing happens again. Truth be told, that should have broken the old model by now. Because if understanding the pattern was enough, the pattern would not still be running. If insight was reaching the generating point, the loop would already be gone. Instead, the person is sent back into more understanding, more self-analysis, more processing, more regulation, more language. And the model never has to face the exposure. It's arrived too late. So today, I want to take this to the point that most systems never reach. Okay? That's where we're going today. Before the behavior, before the body response becomes something you can analyze, before it becomes something you can name, because there's a moment before the pattern appears, a tiny, itsy, witsy, teeny, weeny moment. So fast that most people never even notice it. And that's where we're going today. And Codex names that point as the occupation gap. The occupation gap is the moment before the pattern appears, where direct contact with reality, the thing that happened in that moment, is lost and compensation takes position. And this is the missing point. It's not the wound. It's not the trauma. It's not the belief. It's not the mindset. It's not the story. It's not the behavior. The point before all of that most systems arrive after that point, after the story is formed, after the body has responded, after the behavior is visible, after the mind has created an explanation that sounds true. By then, the decisive point has already happened, and Codex reads it earlier. Codex reads the point where reality enters the system, enters your life, enters your reality, enters your body as signal. And signal is the contact point before interpretation, before meaning, before identity, before the body response gets turned into a personal story. In the occupation gap, the signal either stays clean or gets distorted. That's the difference, and that's all we're dealing with. That's what makes or breaks an extraordinary life of the fullest expression, or in a life of persistent, consistent, never-ending looping of compensation. The one ages and decays, the one creates vitality over and over again. That's the difference. The signal distorts when direct contact cannot hold. The system reaches when that moment, when the signal cannot be held and it goes into distortion. It reaches for an old root. It reaches for protection, for performance, for control, collapse, fixing, proving. And when it does that, the signal, your life force, is no longer received as contact. It is rooted now through compensation. And that is where distortion begins. And once signal is rooted through compensation, the behavior has already started forming before the story appears. That's key point. Now, I have a lot of experience with this. I've been looking at this my whole life. I've been exploring this my whole life. In my book, What is Mimic? I talk about it. I talk about it in one of the chapters that relates to my own personal story of chronic, severe, persistent, consistent abuse of almost 20 years. And I show the difference between how signal gets distorted or stays clean and what the consequence is of that. The thing is, and here's the reality. Reality is touching your body all day, every day. A message lands, a room goes quiet, a payment is delayed. A mirror catches your face, a body sensation appears, an offer comes in, an opportunity comes in easily. Someone says no, someone says yes. These are all contact points. Reality enters as signal. Clean signal is simple. A message is a message. A delay is a delay. A pause is a pause. A sensation is data. There is no identity in it yet. The problem begins when direct contact fails. This is where signal enters. Direct contact does not hold. Compensation takes position, often based on a whole bunch of different reasons and scenarios. But compensation takes position and the signal distorts. And that's what we respond to and from. The event stops being an event and becomes personal evidence. The room going quiet becomes, I said too much. I am too much. The delayed payment becomes, I always have to chase. I'm not worthy. The mirror glance in the mirror, catching your eye in the mirror, becomes, I look old. The open afternoon, free afternoon becomes, I've got to fill it. I'm lazy. The body sensation becomes something is wrong with me. The offer that comes in, the opportunity that comes in out of nowhere becomes, I will owe them. Or this farcical concept of being out of fair exchange. That is the occupation gap. The event has been occupied. You are no longer responding to what happened. You are responding to what distortion made it mean. Then the body responds. And when the body responds, the behavior forms. Then the mind has a party. It creates the story after the fact. And the story sounds so convincing because it is explaining reality from inside the distortion. And this is why insight can feel powerful and still change. I was going to say so little, but no, it will still change nada, nothing. Insight changes nothing. Awareness changes nothing. Your insight may be accurate about the downstream behavior. It may describe the wound, the trigger, the nervous system state, the belief, the emotional response, but it is arriving after the occupation. Insight cannot correct a point, it arrives after. And that is why the loop keeps surviving the explanation. This is where people have been misled for so long. People have been told that when the pattern returns, it means there is more to understand. There is more to heal. There is more to process, more regulate, more integrate, more uncover, more work. So they go back into the story. You become more articulate, more self-aware, more precise about how the patterns play out and your responses to them. More psychologically fluent, even more somatically fluent. But then life applies pressure. And the very same output, the very same response appears again and again and again. And you know what? For me, the worst part about that is bad enough. I mean, in terms of what it robs you of your life, what it strips you of vitality, and what it creates in aging and decay, that's bad enough. But you know what's even worse for me? You know what I see as the ultimate violence to this system? This is where you are most likely to blame yourself. And the old model encourages that. Because you think that you missed something, resisted something, failed to integrate something. But it was never you. The work was entering too late. The behavior was already generated. The story was already downstream. The body response was already carrying the distortion. The occupation had already taken place. As I've already said, most systems arrive after occupation. Therapy usually works with the story. I can tell you that from personal experience, tragic personal experience. Coaching usually works with the behavior. Mindset usually works with interpretation. Somatic work often works with the body response. Trauma work often works once the signal has already been organized into history, into meaning and identity. And that can produce language and relief and management and the feeling of being deeply understood. Yes, it does give that, granted. But let me ask you a question. Do you want to be understood and live in a life of being loop-de-loop, trapped, caught, aging, decaying? Or do you want a life of the fullest expression that you're here to live? That's freedom. So in my model of the world, I'd sacrifice being deeply understood anytime. It does not reach the occupation point. And if the occupation point remains intact, the route keeps running. It just dresses it differently. The over-explainer becomes the conscious communicator. The delay becomes waiting for the right signal. The avoidance becomes honoring the body. The control becomes energetic protection. The fear becomes discernment. And the performance becomes precision. The vocabulary improves, but the root stays untouched. That is why Codex had to name a different point, the occupation gap. The point where signal gets distorted before behavior appears. I'm going to bring it right down. I'm going to bring it right down to ordinary, everyday life experiences, because the ordinary moments expose this way more dramatically than dramatic ones. So picture this. A room goes quiet after you speak. That is the event. A room went quiet. People may be thinking, they may be tired, they might be digesting what was just said, or simply just quiet. Clean contact with that reality would let silence remain silence. But if the signal distorts, silence becomes personal. And how many times have you done that? I've said too much. They're judging me. I made them feel uncomfortable. I need to soften that. I should explain. Now, behavior forms. You laugh when nothing is funny. You over-explain. You apologize. You make excuses. You add warmth you did not mean. That it was not truth. No, it was not really, really down in the deepest parts of you. True you. You rescue the room from its own silence. And it feels relational. It might even look emotionally intelligent. But it came from occupation. And later, you might say things like, I have a pattern of over-explaining because I don't feel safe being seen. That might describe something real, but it's late. The earlier event was way simpler. Silence touched the system. Direct contact with that reality, with that silence, failed. The signal distorted for any reason, based on anything that could have happened or not happened in the past, in the current. But the signal distorted and compensation took position. And the behavior followed. That is the occupation gap. Let's look at money. A payment is due, but it has not arrived yet. That is the event. Clean contact checks the date that it was due, checks the terms it was due, sends one practical follow-up if needed. That is all. That's it. But when signal distorts, that delay becomes identity. And the language, the sensations, the story, the behavior, the pattern, here we go again. I always have to chase. People take advantage of me. I'm not worthy. Money never comes cleanly. I should have protected myself. And the body tightens. The mind scans, and your tone shifts. Your tone changes. And the next message from you carries accusation before anything has even been verified. You might call this a money pattern. It is showing up through money, sure, but it did not begin with money. It began where delay was occupied. The delayed payment was contact. The occupation was, I'm the one left waiting. The behavior formed, and from that occupied route, the distortion happened. Take the mirror. You pass a mirror and catch your reflection. Or a window. That is the event, a visual contact point. Clean contact would allow reflection to remain exactly that, reflection. But the signal distorts. And now the story arrives. I look tired. I look old. I look older. I cannot be seen like this. I need to fix this before anyone sees me. Any one of the stories that we tell ourselves. Then the behavior appears. The checking and the adjusting and the hiding, overcompensating, avoiding the camera. Looking for reassurance without asking for it directly. Think back. The mirror did not say, or the window did not say, you are being assessed. That was the distortion. The mirror simply reflected. Compensation occupied the reflection. A reflection then became an assessment, and that is occupation. Let's take one other one, because I've got a situation this afternoon. I have some open time this afternoon. Now, do I fill it or do I allow it? This is a big one. You look at your calendar and there's a free afternoon. I have no appointments this afternoon. So what do? You look at your calendar and there's a free afternoon. That is the event. Open time, space. But if the signal distorts, space becomes evidence against you. I should be doing more. I must be behind. I cannot waste this. I need to use this properly. If I was, I don't know, Mr. or Mrs. Joe Bloggs, who has got $100 gazillion in their account and they're world famous or whatever, I wouldn't have this spare time. I would be so busy making lots and lots of money and being in so much demand. You make all the stories about it. And then you fill the afternoon. You create tasks. You call it catching up. You turn rest into guilt. You turn space into productivity crisis. The free afternoon was not the problem. The occupation was. I am behind if time is empty. And that occupation is extraordinarily expensive, because the body may be asking for open space. I don't know about you, but my most potent moments of creativity is in that open space. But compensation turns open space into failure. That is not productivity. That is distorted signal. And this is why the body conversation has to become much, much cleaner. Because people have been taught to treat every sensation as truth. Because the body does register contact constantly. Pressure, heat, contraction, fatigue, a breath change, a throat shift, a tightening in the belly, a pause in the chest. But here's the thing, that is all data. The body gives us data. That is it. It's the compensation that gives it identity. The body may well register pressure. And that pressure is a form of signal to be used cleanly. But compensation says, or distortion says, I'm unsafe. The body may register heat, and compensation says, I'm exposed. The body might register throat tension, and compensation says, I cannot speak. Apply a whole lot of meanings, oh, my chakras shut or closed or whatever. No, the occupation became distorted. The body may register fatigue, and compensation says, I'm failing. The body did not say most of what the mind claims it said, ever. Ever. Sensation is data at contact, and that's how it needs to be addressed. Signal becomes useful only when the root is read. Because when distortion occupies the gap, the next sentence, the next thought can feel like truth. Because a tight throat becomes I cannot speak. Heat in the face becomes I'm being judged. A heavy body becomes I cannot move. A nervous system response becomes this is not safe. And there can be real data there. The body may be giving a clean no. Rest may be correct. A pause may be correct. But the sensation itself is not automatic authority. And this is why Codex does not worship sensation. Codex reads the root. The question is not, what does this sensation I'm experiencing mean? That question can already be inside distortion. The cleaner question is, what happened to the signal before it became meaning? There is the key, because meaning may be the first sign that occupation has already begun. Because the signal enters, the body registers it, compensation takes position, and then the almighty I appears. I am unsafe. I need to fix this. I must prepare the room. I cannot be seen like this. I always have to chase. I am not ready. The I may feel immediate, feels familiar, feels protective, feels wise, but that does not make it origin, and it does not make it truth. This is one of the deepest errors in human function, because people assume the first internal voice is truth. Codex does not make that assumption. The first I may already be occupation. And this is why you can defend the very thing running you. Because hesitation can feel wise, delay can feel regulated, softening can feel kind or empathetic. Fear can feel protective. And the story feels like self. So you defend the root that is running you. Because once a compensation becomes I, correction feels personal. And that is how the root survives and it claims authorship. Distorted authorship. And then you say, this is my truth. Maybe it is. Or maybe contact failed, signal distorted, compensation occupied the root, and the first I was already distortion speaking. And this is where Codex separates from the entire improvement model. Codex is not entering through the reaction, the improved story, the corrected behavior, or another regulation loop. Codex reads where direct contact was lost, where the signal distorted, where the compensation took position. And that is the differentiator. That is the difference that is so vast. Because most models work with what the system has already produced. Codex reads the point producing it. And this is why you can do years of work and still feel caught, still feel like you're trapped in the loop. You may have been working with outputs while believing you were at the origin, and that is the trap. The explanation that we have through all the awareness and all the insight is not the origin. The story is the report. The behavior is the output. The body response is data after contact. The occupation point sits earlier, and that's the missing location. And once you see it, and this is important, because once you see it, the old model loses authority, and you have no reason to blame yourself any longer. The pattern does not begin when you notice it. The first explanation is not automatically truth. Sensation is not automatic command. Insight cannot reach backward into a point it arrived after. The occupation gap changes the map. It changes the map completely. A quiet room, a delayed payment, a mirror, an open time, a body sensation, an easy offer, an incredible opportunity, an unanswered message. None of these begin as personal evidence. They begin as contact points. And the question then becomes precise and exact. Did contact hold? Did the signal stay clean? Or did compensation occupy that gap? Because once that occupation happens, behavior follows. Then the story arrives to justify the behavior. And that is why the story can sound so convincing and so personal. It's explaining reality from inside the distortion. And that is the cost of the old model. Because you can spend years understanding the story that formed after the root is already taken. You can become fluent in wounds, patterns, nervous system states, trauma language, beliefs, triggers, you name it. Fluency gets mistaken for change all the time. Then life applies pressure, and the same output appears in a different costume. I don't know about you, but for me, that is what I call betrayal. Because you were taught then to think you did not go deep enough. This is where the old model avoids real exposure. It arrived too late. And Codex changes the location. It reads before the person becomes explainable, before the pattern becomes visible, before identity claims the signal. That's a good one. Before identity claims the signal. And that is why this occupation gap is so extraordinarily vital. It names the exact point that all systems miss, the moment where direct contact is lost, and that is the culprit. Clean signal, because we always receive clean signal. Always, almost always, always 99.999999999% of the time, we are receiving clean signal, but it becomes distorted. And behavior begins forming before the story can sound true. So in closing, the point I want to make is the behavior was not the first event. The pattern is not the first event. The story was not the first truth. The body response was not automatically the original signal. The body response is not automatically your, I will say it, what we use inside the codex system, your blueprint signal. The body response was not automatically your blueprint signal, your original or the original, your authentic signal. The pattern began earlier. It began where direct contact failed and compensation took position. And there could be a gazillion reasons for that. We identify that and clear that inside the work in Cosmic Tribe. That is the occupation gap. This is where Codex begins. At the point where signal was distorted before behavior appeared. And that is why Codex is not another version of pattern work. It's not a better explanation of the same loop. It reads the place where the loop is generated. If the same output still appears under pressure, more insight is no longer the correct move. The root has to be read accurately and corrected. And that is what we do inside the Cosmic Tribe. Cosmic Tribe is not a group for more self-analysis. It's not a place where we keep circling the pattern, finding new language for it, or making a story, or making the stories more intelligent. Inside the Cosmic Tribe, we work with the point before pattern becomes visible. We read where direct contact is being lost, where signal is distorting, where the body response is no longer clean data, but has already been organized through compensation, where behavior begins forming before the person has even explained it. And this is the level we work at and clear permanently. Because if the signal is distorted before behavior appears, then trying to change the behavior afterwards will always be too late. Inside Cosmic Tribe, the work is precise. We read the root. We identify where the system, where your system is converting contact into identity. We clear the interference that keeps making the same output return under pressure. And we track what changes in real life. Not just what you understand, not what more insight you may have gained, not what more awareness has popped up in your mind, not just what you can explain, not just what feels clearer for a few days, but what actually changes in behavior, body response, money, visibility, relationships, decision-making, execution, and the way in which reality is being met. And that is why the Cosmic Tribe exists. Over 100 people have moved through the Cosmic Tribe. And the reason that matters is because we're not working with theory. We are watching what changes when the repeated output is addressed beneath the description layer. This is why the changes people report in the Cosmic Tribe are not based on better motivation or more self-awareness. They come from working beneath the description layer. And we have seen people report shifts in their bodies, in their relationships, in their money decisions, in their emotional responses, in their family dynamics, pressure responses, and repeated behaviors they've already spent years trying to understand, trying to shift. Because understanding was never the problem. The root was. And that's what gets identified, cleared, and corrected. The Cosmic Tribe is the ongoing codex field where the root is read, corrected, and tested through lived consequence. That's the important distinction. And the way into the Cosmic Tribe is with a structural review. Because this is not just about joining another container, another program, because the language sounds powerful. It begins with reading your system accurately, not another explanation of the pattern, a reading of where direct contact is being lost before the behavior appears. Because the question is no longer, why do I keep doing this? The sharper question, the important question, the quality question is, where is direct contact being lost before the behavior ever appears? And that is the point that Codex reads. That is the occupation gap. And once you see it, the pattern can no longer pretend to be the beginning. And that is what I want to leave you with today. Not with another thing to analyze, with a different place to look. Because if the same output keeps appearing under pressure, the pattern is not asking for more explanation. The root has to be read, corrected, cleared. And that's what we do inside the Cosmic Tribe. And the way in begins with a structural review. If you recognize this, if you can feel like it's landing, if you can see that the behavior was never the beginning, then this is the point to stop circling the story and have your system read accurately. I'm going to post the link inside this broadcast once I'm finished so that you can apply. But for now, just take this with you. The next time a pattern appears, don't only ask why it happened. Ask where direct contact was lost before it began, because that is the occupation gap. And once you see that point, the pattern can no longer pretend it was the origin. Thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you on the next Collapse broadcast.